Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to have you, man. I know you got a little bit of some network stress going on over there, some outage maybe, hopefully.
Battling with ISP today, so yeah, off and on, but hopefully we'll come in across the finish line, with the car exploding and such, but we'll get there.
That's the best way to do it. Cool. Well, Corey, what have you got in store for us today?
Yeah, today we're going to become instant API hackers with two tools, Postman and Burp Suite. I'll walk everyone through why I use those tools, and what we'll be doing with them is hacking one request to rule them all. And so this is a unique type of CTF that I created about a year ago. And if anyone has interacted with APIs before, they know the struggle of getting all the right parameters, the authorization, and everything working to be able to test them and make sure they're secure. And with this CTF style, AppySec can actually put $10,000 in prizes behind it. And in order to win, the only thing that the players needed to do is make a single API request. But of course, they had to have all the right parameters, the authorization, and everything else. The first winner out of 200 participants took 14 hours. Wow. Second place was 24 hours. And so going through this instant API hacker workshop will help to take that time down a bit. Because I think what most participants do in that sort of competition is they throw the kitchen sink at the APIs instead of understanding what's going on with the business logic and what it's all about. And yeah, that's what we'll get into.
Sweet. Making a little more targeted.
I'm glad we added a little bit of the disclaimer just in case the network connectivity becomes a little bit flaky for you. Hey, we'll be here in the background keeping on some support. So if anything goes wrong, no stress, no worries. But you've got us here in the background if you need us. But we'll let you run with it, my friend.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yours.
Thanks, Corey.
Enjoy, my friend.
All right, everyone. So we're going to be hopping into a PowerPoint. We'll be jumping out of the PowerPoint. We'll be in and out of different apps. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen. And we're going to go with this screen here. And this is the application that we will be workshopping today. So this is one request to rule them all. This is a Middle Earth style vacation planner. And so if you were using this, you would see our services include being able to register a certain location, maybe do a mead tasting over in Gundor, or just going through Middle Earth. And what else do we have? We have the Mordor Spa, of course. And so this is an app that I helped design about a year and a half ago. And there's little to no functionality in the web app. It's all API driven. And so once we get into the workshop, this is really the start of everything. So this is where you're going to get your open API spec. Your interactive docs are here. There's a Postman collection. And we'll get all into that in a moment. First up, a little death by PowerPoint. And so what we'll be doing today is hands-on API hacking. To become an instant API hacker, you need three things. You need the right tools, you need a vulnerable target, which is most of them that are out there, and you need the right techniques. And so you're welcome to use any tools that you want to be able to interact with APIs, but the tools that I use include Postman and Burp Suite. And if you don't have Burp Suite Pro and you're using Community Edition, you'll want to supplement those intruder functionalities that are going to be throttled. And so you'll want to supplement with something like WFuzz or FFUF. I use Postman and Burp Suite for a few reasons. So on the Postman side of things, I'm using that to keep my scope together. And I know I didn't really do an intro, so I'll start there. I'm Corey Ball, author of Hacking APIs. I'm the head of OffSec for AppySec, and I help found and run that API Security University, completely free educational platform for all things API security related. And I'm also the founder of Happy Labs, and that's where I'm doing a lot of AI and API pen tests regularly. And so when I'm thinking about becoming an instant API hacker, I am thinking about my scope as a pen tester. You can also have your long-term scope as a bug bounty hunter if you're going back and testing an API regularly. And so Postman is a great tool for that because it is a browser built for APIs. And so when you're testing an API, you want to have your scope in a place. Typically, clients will provide that, or you'll have access to their developer section like the app that we'll see here in a minute. And you can import that scope into Postman. Then I proxy that traffic into Burp Suite. So I'm getting the best of both worlds, where Postman is great for testing wide across an entire API collection. So if you have 100 endpoints and all sorts of request methods and all sorts of parameters and everything else, I keep that in Postman, and I can use the collection runner, which is a single button that's going to run every single API request in that collection. And so if I wanted to test for something like improper inventory management, where the application, the API is located at onerequest.com/API/v3, and I want to replace that v3 and turn it into an environmental variable, and then I can replace that across the entire API collection and test for things like v2, v1, internal, private, UAT. All these API endpoints are versions that are may not be as supported as the others, which could be a gateway into all sorts of vulnerabilities. So Postman, I use that to test wide. There's lots of cool functionality built into Postman. There's Postbot for AI functionality. You can have it automatically write scripts for you if you wanted to enhance your testing over there. Burp Suite, I use for diving deep into individual requests. And so if I want to fuzz a request, or if I want to fuzz the path, or perform specific attacks, I'll use Repeater. If I'm going to use a bunch of requests, then I'm going to use Intruder to dive deep into those. Since this is a workshop, I suggest going to onerequest@appysecuniversity.com. That is the target that we will be focusing on today. Okay, here's the thing about APIs. A lot of the enterprise vulnerability management tools that are out there fail at testing APIs. And so they come back with false negative results. You run Nessus, Qualys, fill in the blank, any of these tools, they go up, they start making requests to the API, they hit that authentication boundary, and they get a 400, and that's the end of the test. And so these are good at finding some security misconfigurations, but that only represents one out of the OWASP API Security Top 10. And so this is a real scan that I did of one request just a couple weeks ago. 0 API findings. So we have authorization issues here. We have excessive data exposure. We have all sorts of things that are going to leak out the most critical data that an organization is holding. This is an automated scan with Burp Suite Pro. So we get a bit more here. We can see, potential for HTTP request smuggling, and this was authenticated. And so I had a token, it went through, automatically made the test, but it wasn't testing for these specific API vulnerabilities. And so again, 0 findings on this side as well. Okay, so we have an idea of what the tools are, we have the target, and now we're getting into the techniques. And so The most important thing, when I was talking with John a minute ago, and I said that it took 14 hours for the first participant in the CTF to claim the prize, I believe a good part of that is because, in a CTF, we're throwing everything at the application. We're doing all of our automated scans. We're running all the tools. We're fuzzing all over the place. But before we do any of that, we want to understand, why does this API exist to begin with? Why do certain endpoints exist? What is the purpose behind it? What do good requests and responses look like? And that is part of what we could have been seeing in that burp automated scan, where it didn't have those successful requests built in with the right parameters and the right data. And so instead of seeing fully formed requests, it still had some of the variables from the API docs. And that's where you can use Postman to craft those into fully formed requests that are going to come back successful. And then you can do high quality testing. And so the combination here is to use the API as it was designed, analyze those endpoints, and discover and exploit API vulnerabilities from there. While you're analyzing, while you're looking over the API, you can already start to detect certain vulnerabilities. And as testers, those are some of the things that can catch our eye, and all of a sudden we forget about the rest of the scope and we dive in. And we'll have that experience here shortly. All right. So one request to rule them all: vacation planner. And so we're thinking about functionality that's going to be related to that. I should be able to find events. Maybe I can schedule events. Maybe certain things are public and other things are private. Navigate over to the developers page, and I'll do all this as well in a second. But you can navigate over to the developers page. You can download the Postman collection. That's going to be the easiest and most straightforward to get into Postman. We'll import that in as a collection here shortly. You can also download the API spec, and I'll show you what we can do with that as well. In Postman, go ahead and hit import. And here you can drag and drop that Postman collection, or you can select files or folders and navigate to it there. And then we'll get into updating the variables. So I'm going to switch over. Actually, let's do a couple more things at this level, and then I'll switch over. So once you get an API collection imported, the most important piece to start off with is to go to the top level of the collection. And that's where you have your top level variables, scripts, and authorization. So once we register an account, which is a part of that using the API as it was designed, you're going to get a token, and then we can put that into the authorization to be able to use across the entire collection. To use Postman and Burp Suite together, which for me is the best thing you can do as an API hacker, you're going to want to proxy all of your Postman traffic through Burp Suite. So that way, everything that you do in Postman with those fully formed requests get collected by Burp Suite, and then you have high quality requests and responses to be able to manipulate and attack the API over in Burp Suite. Okay, so using the API, this includes reading the docs, going through those before we start scanning and attacking and doing everything else, importing into Postman, and getting your requests working. So adding missing variables, updating variables, and making successful requests. When you come across a token, there are all sorts of options for analyzing JWTs. One of them is JWT Auditor. You can put your token into this. This is typically one of my first steps. So I'm analyzing, I'm using API as it was designed, and this is sort of off to the side as I get my first token. What's the information that's encoded in that JWT? And is there sensitive information? Is the token a type that we can brute force the secret? And this is just a very easy tool that you'd be able to use for that. There's also the JWT, I'm blanking on it now, but there's a JWT command line tool as well that you can analyze and test on those. Okay, and final thing before we hop over and get more hands-on, top 3 vulnerabilities for API hackers. We see these all the time, broken authentication. And so one of the things you can test for in a typical API pen test would be you take the collection in Postman and you run it without authorization and you run it without authentication. And if you're getting back 200 in the HTTP response for sensitive requests, then there's a good chance that API has broken authentication. And this is typically one of the big ingredients for major data breaches that involve APIs. Some sort of authentication is missing, and an attacker can go in, find those sensitive requests that are going to leak PII, PHI, so on and so forth, and then they can just request the entire user database. And this is like a broken API that's internet facing with all that sensitive data. It's just a perfect storm for a breach. Beyond authentication, flawed authorization is all over the place. And so the typical tools that are either monitoring or logging or anything like that for APIs, an authorization attack looks identical to a successful API request. And so there isn't this malicious pay code that has a signature that you can check for. Really, you have to have the context of the API to know this is user A, this is user A's token, and user A should only be able to interact with user A's resources. But we see that user A can often do all sorts of things with user B's resources. And BOLA, that's when you can create, read, update, delete another user's data. BAFLA is typically when you are able to cross role-based access control boundaries and perform actions that your role shouldn't be able to. And so if I'm a regular user, but I can hit the admin endpoint and perform admin functionality, that's when that authorization boundary is broken in that direction. Finally, BOPLA. This is new on the 2023 version of the API Security Top 10, and it involves 2 of the past top 10 items combined together, which is excessive data exposure and mass assignment. Excessive data exposure, see this all the time. An API request is sent, and the backend sends the full data object to the front end and expects the front end to filter out just the data that it wants. So when you're using a web app, what that looks like is, a forum, it would just have your username and the post. But if you were to intercept that API request, you would see the full data object, which includes everyone's user IDs, all the other users in there, maybe your role and status, and all sorts of sensitive information that should probably be filtered out on the back end and never sent to the front end to begin with. Okay, so those are the top 3 vulnerabilities that we'll be looking for. Obviously, there's a lot of prep that went into this front end side of it. And so we'll attack one request to rule them all and get as far as we can. But with it taking 14 hours for the top participant a year and a half ago, I'm guessing there's going to be plenty of additional investigation and attacking and everything else that you'd want to do with one request to rule them all. Feel free beyond this talk to continue into that. And I will stop this PowerPoint now and switch over here. Okay, so we've navigated over to developers. Maybe, maybe not. Fingers crossed for the internet. Okay, maybe I'm back. All right, so developer portal. Down at the bottom, this is where we're going to grab our API spec, grab our Postman collection. I've already added those. To guide you through the challenges that are involved, there is this challenge link over here. So plenty of Middle-earth flavor text, but here are the things that we're looking for. And so we are trying to discover Celebrimbor's user ID on the platform to infiltrate communications. So the dark powers that be in Middle-earth are trying to, I don't know, hand off some sort of super important moonstone item. We don't want that to happen. We're going to hack for good and stop them from being able to do that. But in order to do so, what we're going to need to do is look for Celebrimbor's user ID as we're using the API as it was designed, right? Okay, let me pull up Postman. Okay. So when you want to import your collection, go up here, these three dots, import. Maybe. It should not take this long. I'm guessing more network issues. Well, let's give this a second. Hey, John.
Hey, just jumping in case you need a hand, my friend.
Yeah, how's it looking over there? Still spinning hamsters?
Still spinning hamsters. I do have plenty of more on the presentation, but it looks like, yeah, Postman is having some issues.
Well, should still be able to, hey, run pretty smoothly for the folks that are following along, right? So
yeah,
at the very least, that will let them keep charging onwards. And what do you think? Is there best move to kind of talk through it?
Yeah, let me throw the presentation back up. I didn't make my sacrifice to the demo gods this morning. My fault.
That's okay.
Oh, good.
We're just wanting to, hey, step in and show you we're still here for you in case you need us, man.
All right, thanks a lot for the support.
Of course. Well, do you want to bring the slides back up?
Let's do it. All right.
Roger.
Yeah, all good. Just want to make sure you're all right before we add to the scene.
Hey, all right. At least this is working. So,
cool.
Yeah. What do we want to do here? Let's continue on. Luckily, even if the hands-on demo part is going to be problematic, I have taken some screenshots to be able to continue on either way. So this is, analyzing endpoints. So once you've used the API, what do you look for? You're going to check for business logic flaws. You're going to check for excessive data exposure. And this is the specific vulnerability that you're going to be on the hunt for Celebrimbor's ID. You're going to register for your account. You're going to update. Let's go back over here. Update your variables. And so this base URL should be the same as the web app, which is HTTPS one request at AppySec University. So let me go back here. Nope. Let's do this. All right. Yeah, so it's going to be this one request, appysecuniversity.com. And so go ahead and add those in. I'm going to do a quick double check on Postman. Yep, still spinning great. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and update the base URL. And then you're going to use one request to, here, I think I can at least help a little bit on nope, this is not doing much either. So back purely to the presentation. Okay. Okay, first thing you're going to want to do. This is an example app. This is not one request right here. And so you'll want to use the API as it was designed by signing up for an account. First thing, register for an account. That's going to get you that's going to have your username and password registered in the database. And then you're going to want to log in to get your JWT. Once you've updated those variables, then you can make your first collection run. And at the top level, once you've added those variables in, you can use the collection runner. It's at the top right. And that will require 2 clicks, and that will send every single request in that collection through to Burp Suite if you've set up the proxy. And from there, you can start analyzing endpoints. This is an extraction outside of this, but this illustrates the things that you want to pay attention to. So which requests manipulate data? Which requests handle sensitive information? Which requests parameters are used the most often and the least? If you're seeing that email is all over the place, then you get a lot of value out of going through in Postman and updating those values so that you're getting successful requests back. To get to the highest tier, highest quality testing for API security, you want to have those parameters set up so that you're getting those successful requests back. Okay, so since I don't have the app demo running in front of me, what we're going to do is look through the variety of request options that you have. And so in one request to rule them all, you have a V2 request for locations. If you make an authenticated successful request there, you're going to see a variety of activities that are a part of this app and a part of this world. So you can read these activities and you can see groups and objects that don't belong to you. And by making several requests, you can look at locations, groups, users. You want to make sure that, and I would do this in Postman, that you're making those requests and that you're seeing successful responses back. If you're not seeing those, then you need to read what's in the response and be able to manipulate the parameters to fit what they're looking for, what the API is looking for. If you're into a request that has all sorts of parameters for filtering, for ease of use and to get down to what you want, you can use Postman to uncheck those boxes and simplify your requests so that you're getting back successful responses. What you're looking for at this point is a request that has way too much information, more than you're expecting, which represents excessive data exposure. And this is that full data object, right, being shared. If you look into locations, you look into groups, that should be a good hint for you to look for and filter out Celebrim Bor's ID. This is an example of what excessive data exposure would look like. In this request, you're expecting to only see the data for this single user. But instead, what comes back is that user's data and the admin that set up that user's data. And in this case, you get things that could potentially pay off in a long-term engagement on an API test. You're getting the admin's user ID, the admin's email, their privilege level, and the naming schemes that are used for those parameters, and their multi-factor status. All stuff that is great to see as an API hacker. This is what the front end would look like in that instance. And so you don't see the vulnerability on the front end at all, but if you intercept the API request, then you see all sorts of useful data. And this is using a different application, the completely ridiculous API. And in this instance, you can see other users' IDs, other users' emails, other users' vehicle IDs. And in APIs, and a successful attack could be as easy as changing a 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 3 when resource IDs are incremental. But we see less incremental predictable IDs, and we see more UUIDs in place. And if your computer were to try and brute force those UUIDs, the sun would go out before your computer would successfully guess one. And so the best way to do it is to find excessive data exposure, and then it is handed to you, and you don't have to brute force anything. You just find that complicated ID, and then you can use that in additional attacks. And I hope there are no developers out there that are like, depending on the complexity of UUID with security by obscurity, and assuming, we don't have to put in authorization controls, but that's often what happens. I don't know if that mindset is what's behind it, but we see it all the time. Authorization testing. So to perform authorization testing on an API, you need 3 things. You need a resource ID, you need the request that handles that resource, and then you need the vulnerable API provider. And so just because an API has incremental IDs doesn't mean it's vulnerable. That means that the bar for making the attack successfully is lowered. It's much easier to predict and to put into intruder and to have that cycle through thousands of numbers in incremental cases. But the piece of the puzzle that's the most important is the authorization control that has that context and restricts access for user A to only be able to access user A's resources. This is a BOLA cheat sheet. The first is the classic example of BOLA. There's an incremental ID. You can make a GET request. You change that ID from a 2 to a 3, and you get someone else's data. But the amount that I actually see that in the wild now on a given pen test is much lower than it was 5 years ago. But what I do see often still is when there's a combination, and you can see plenty of BOLA in the wild by finding out the combination of the right resources to make that successful request. And so in the ID combo, you would see user plus the resource ID. Maybe you see that in the post body, or down below at group and user combo, you see tenant level resources. And so Apple versus Google in the path. And if you know a user and their email, perhaps you can do company A to user B, and that sort of combination to be able to interact with those resources. Okay, so this is a great example of hunting for BOLA and trying to find out what in the request is needed to be able to interact with user B's resources. And when I look at this, I see there's a resource ID in the path. That's probably something valuable. There's an authorization token. And down in the post, there's a unique UUID for this user. My technique when I come across a request like this is to figure out what is important in this request to make a successful attack take place. What in this request represents user B's resources. And so what I start to do is I take things away. And in this case, spoilers there, I figure out, first thing that comes to mind is the JSON token, right? And so the JWT here, that has user information in it, and maybe that is tied to the resource. It's not. This JWT just says essentially that it's just treated as you are logged in. And so it doesn't care who you are. It doesn't represent user A or user B or anything like that. It just represents you're a user on this platform. My next guess would be, hey, that looks like an incremental ID in the path, 133201. I wonder what happens if I change that around. Doesn't do much. Okay, my final guess, this user ID in the post body, what if I used other users' UUIDs? That doesn't change much either. But there are custom headers in this app. These are incremental, predictable, so on and so forth. That's too much work. So luckily, this application actually had excessive data exposure that represented all the tenant IDs and all the client IDs. And as long as you have the right combination of those two, you have full access to user B's resources. So the rest of this presentation is a bit off of what we were planning the workshop to be, but API security is more important today than it ever has been before. Now with APIs, the attack surface is greatly expanding with the adoption of LLM applications, AI all over the place, MCPs. Anyone that's in API security has a good step up to jump into AI security. APIs are a huge part of what's going on with LLM interactions, what's going on with MCP servers, and how AI applications are interacting with real world resources. It's all, a lot of it is APIs. The local MCP server, less on that end, but anything on the internet side, much more APIs. And so when we see this MCP architecture, you can see APIs are all over the place, and these are vectors for testing and attacking. And if you want to learn more about hands-on API hacking, I have a course over on AppySec University. That's a full pen test course. We have a certification called the API Security Certified Professional. If you want to test your skills and get certified, that's an option over there as well. These are a list of all sorts of free vulnerable APIs that you can test your skills on. Over at AppySec University, I just released an MCP security course. So again, getting APIs into the next stage of testing, which is AI-focused testing. And yeah, I think we still have some time here, even with this interruption. So I'm going to see if we can still maybe do some other things. And here, I'm going to go back to when we were talking about analyzing API endpoints. And so one of the reasons I said to download the API docs, you have the Postman collection into Postman. You can also use that, or you can download the OAS. And all sorts of LLMs are very good at combing through all that JSON data and pulling out risks or high risk requests that can help you focus your testing in. So maybe the demo gods might be a little bit with me, and maybe we could do this here. Review this OAS, check for high risk requests that I should focus on. The other thing we're going to be up against is, Fable 5 plus cybersecurity. So we'll see if this works out or if we'll get demoted back to Opus. And this is something you can do with an OAS. You could do this with any form. You can take a screen capture of some API endpoints and do the same thing. But when I'm up against an API and there are hundreds of endpoints, and this API is public because, if we're interacting with a public LLM, then we want to make sure we're only using public information in there. We don't want to be handing off private data to someone else's servers. So again, make sure that you have permission and that, maybe in a bug bounty, for example, you want to take an OAS that's public and internet facing and stick it in and have it tested. I don't think, nope, couldn't connect. And so that did not work out. But anyways, typically you could take Claude or another tool. You can add the OAS to it, help it filter out from hundreds of endpoints which requests handle sensitive data, which requests should you focus your testing on. And it does a pretty good job of getting you, 80 to 90% of the way towards finding those most sensitive requests that you should be focusing your time on. And I think I will call it there. I don't know if we have a Q&A. We can hop into a Q&A, but that's the end of that presentation.
Hey, you did excellent, Corey. Thank you. There was some love in the chat saying, hey, that's all right. The demo gods, they just weren't with us today. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe, next time we'll get this network stuff figured out.
Well, the benefit is that, hey, this is all on demand. Anyone could access it, dive in, play along whenever they'd like. So I don't think all is lost by any means. You still did the phenomenal job, and thank you for doing it, my friend.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was really cool. Saruman's forces, they win this round. But as John said, right? Yeah, all of you can hack inside the workshop. Keep checking it out. So Q&A time, though.
Yeah, totally.
Chat, everyone that is here, please go ahead. If there's any questions you want to ask Corey, you want to ask him directly about himself, his experience, the workshop itself, anything in the API world, as he said, it's more relative than ever. I totally agree with that. So please load up the questions in chat and let's bring it up. Let's see.
Well, we're given some time for chat to pepper in some questions. Do you mind if I ask you something, Corey? Is that okay?
Let's do it.
So I am self-diagnosed AI pilled, and I've been slinging MCP servers and CLI skills and shenanigans and all that. But I do find myself still like wrestling with MCP servers in the AI world because at the end of the day, those are an API. Is that fair to say? Is that right?
They are functioning in mostly every way the same as APIs are. So there is JSON RPC 2.0, which is going to be very familiar to us, going to look a lot like JSON, right? And so that's the basic interface. And then the AI interaction is going to be like 90+% of the time purely through an API. And so that's why you can do really cool things like take an OAS and say, build me an MCP server. And that works out pretty well. A lot of one-shots on that end. But the cool thing is you can also leverage the LLM in that case to help you hack APIs as well. So if it's already interacting with it and, maybe it's making some requests for resource IDs, and you're like, hey, you know, I just changed my email to this, and what resources can I get now? Or in the MCP security course, I actually vibe code an MCP server live, and then I show off how cool MCP is, how powerful it is, and everything else. And then I show off how things can go wrong. And in the going wrong stage, it was a local MCP server. And I said, hey, I think I lost my API keys. They're in // this other folder. And it's like, hey, I'm super helpful. Here's your API keys that I just stole from you. So getting out of the sandbox and getting you those API keys.
Cool. Well, look, we got an actual question too from chat. The real Jessica, they're saying, what would be the fastest way to cut off an excessive data leak if you discover one? So they're new, all good, no dumb questions.
No dumb questions. Yeah. So this is on the back end. So the back end is sending over the full data object, and so all the filtering should take place before that's sent out. So the data that's being sent should be minimized to what's needed to fulfill the business needs on the front end. Do not count on browsers or clients or anything on the front end to filter with sensitive data. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I had a question as well too, Corey, because I know that a lot of this content was in the intermediate realm, especially for those that haven't been messing around with MCPs and various APIs. For beginners, because I know we do have a lot of beginners and newcomers to cybersecurity and IT security in general. Mm-hmm. What would you maybe recommend as sort of like a prereq, kind of diving into this stuff?
Yeah, I think APIs are one of the best first steps into the realm of hacking, because on the easy side of things, you could be in a browser, you can see your resource ID, and you can change that 1 to a 2 and see what happens. And that is like the easiest. It doesn't require a ton of studying. You just have to have that curiosity to see like, hey, what's going on there? You know, using dev tools to see all the requests that are being made and the data that's being handled there. And so, yeah, first, I mean, there's a book, Hacking APIs. That's a great first step. I think, yeah, APIs are a great introduction to hacking for anyone getting into the industry, because the attacks can be that simple. So if you develop a basic understanding of the HTTP request methods, have an understanding of JSON and what that's going to look like.
Did we lose Corey right at the moment?
I think we did, but it went to a screen share. Oh, wait, no.
I pulled him back.
Okay.
Well, hey, I wanted to add some other visuals to tie that all together, because Corey did have a fantastic and phenomenal workshop. Well, I know his network connectivity was a little bit dicey today. Everyone tuning in should still be able to go access and interact with all of these and all of the guided walkthroughs on those lessons, those exercises, those activities there, with one request to rule them all. And hey, it's a great show. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to go pack up my torch and pitchfork and go meet my ISP really quick.
Nice.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you, Corey.
Have a good one.
You too.